Now, party leaders have been making their case to business leaders at the annual gathering of the Confederation of British Industry. Boris Johnson announced that the Conservatives would postpone a planned cut in corporation tax next year and spend the money on priorities such as the NHS. Jeremy Corbyn insisted that Labour was not anti-business, as some people allege, and promised more investment than business had ever dreamt of, he said. And Jo Swinson told delegates that the Lib Dems were the natural party of business because they wanted to cancel Brexit. Our business editor Simon Jack reports now from the conference.
It's a brave move to use a business conference to announce you're abandoning a planned £6 billion tax cut for business.
I hope you won't mind if I also announce today that we are postponing further cuts in corporation tax. And before you storm the stage, this saves £6 billion that we can put into the priorities of the British people.
The fact it hardly raised an eyebrow means you know people's minds are on something else. Avoiding no-deal Brexit means agreeing a full trade deal in 13 months, something many here doubt is possible without asking for more time.
Can you guarantee to this audience that the UK will never leave the EU without a deal?
I think we're off to a flying start. I see absolutely no reason why we should not get it done in the time available. Thank you.
There was also a promise to cut business rates and lower taxes on hiring new employees.
Can I please welcome Jeremy Corbyn, the Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn.
This is a tough crowd for a party that's promised to hike corporation tax from 19 to 26% and nationalise a long and growing list of private companies.
It is sometimes claimed that I am anti-business. Actually, this is nonsense.
There was an announcement of 320,000 new green apprenticeships, but also a vision of a business-friendly future.
You're going to see more investment than you've ever dreamt of. You're going to have the best educated workforce you could ever have hoped for. And you're going to get the world-leading infrastructure, including...
Business is Labour curious, with many curious about how this will be paid for.
Businesses would dearly like to be talking about something else, politicians too, but there's no doubt that the Brexit issue continues to cast the longest shadow over this gathering. The CBI says we simply can't afford to have another year like 2019, but within the world of business there's surprisingly little confidence that the upcoming election will provide the clarity that everyone is so desperate for.
The Lib Dems arrived with a promise to abolish business rates and replace it with a tax on landlords. But it's their position to revoke Brexit the leader was selling hard today.
The Liberal Democrats are the natural party of business. With the Conservatives in the pocket of Nigel Farage and Jeremy Corbyn stuck in the 1970s, we are the only ones standing up for you.
The SNP said Scotland had not escaped the damage that Brexit uncertainty was doing to the whole UK.
We've already seen over £1 trillion in deferred investment in the UK economy, and it's not doing Scotland's economy any good either. So I think the best option for Scotland is to make its own choice and escape Brexit by voting SNP.
Back at the conference, there was a feeling of weary scepticism about the party's promises.
There's a lot of promises made today, isn't there? I know it's quite close to Christmas. They've all turned up like Santa Claus offering the world.
We've held off investment decisions because of the uncertainty, and we want to see that, taken away so that we can actually move forward.
The hope comes from hearing all three leaders today talking to 1,500 businesses about their vision for the economy, and that's been missing from the election so far. But we have a lot of frustration as well, because we do not have a resolution to the massive issue of our times, Brexit, and we have the possibility we could be here in a year's time having exactly the same conversation.
That is a prospect that business will be desperate to avoid. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, the general election, as we know, will be held on December the 12th. Which is now less than 4 weeks away. The party campaign strategists are keeping a sharp focus on those parts of the United Kingdom where the overall result will be determined. Our chief political correspondent Vicki has been taking a closer look at the electoral map.
The last parliament was one of the most volatile. The government lost more votes than ever before and more MPs changed party than since the early 80s. When parliament stopped for the general election, the Conservatives had 298 MPs, Labour 243. The SNP had 35, there were 24 independents and 20 Liberal Democrats. 326 is the magic number needed for an absolute majority. The BBC has been tracking how each of the parties have polled this year, with the lines here showing trends. The Conservatives have seen an increase since August, now up to around 40%, with the Brexit Party down to 8%. Labour are currently averaging about 29%, and the Liberal Democrats 15%. This, of course, is a national picture. It's impossible to predict how this will translate into local results, and of course doesn't factor in people who haven't yet decided. Now, this is how the country voted in 2017. Let's take a look at some of the key battlegrounds where Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn have been campaigning so far. Mr Johnson will need to take seats off Labour in places like the Midlands if he's to get a decent majority. And he hopes that Brexit will be a factor. Seats like Ashfield, the area strongly backed leaving the EU, and Mr Johnson hopes his promise to get Brexit done will persuade Labour voters to vote for him. And could Remain voters switch from Labour to the Lib Dems to help him? The Conservatives are also optimistic about making gains in Wales, seats like Allen and Deeside, but they'll need to fight off the Lib Dems in the southwest, places like Taunton Deane and Wells, seats the Tories took from the Lib Dems back in 2015. The Green Party has to decide to boost the Lib Dem vote, but the Brexit Party not standing will help Mr Johnson. Jeremy Corbyn needs to win 64 more seats than he did in 2017 just to get a tiny majority, so he'll have to take seats from the Tories, places like Telford in the Midlands. Labour will also hope to perform strongly in London and hope that Remain voters will choose them over the Lib Dems so that they can hold on to seats like Battersea. But it'll be really hard for Labour to get an outright majority without the Scottish seats they used to rely on, which is why Mr Corbyn's been campaigning in Glasgow North West and Lanark and Hamilton East. Other factors could be important. The Lib Dems are a long way behind in many of their former strongholds, but tactical voting might help Jo Swinson. The SNP could win more seats and have a lot of influence if there's another hung parliament. They could reach an agreement to allow Mr Corbyn to become Prime Minister, even if he doesn't win the election outright. So after the most volatile parliament, we now have a very unpredictable election.
That was Vicki Young there with her analysis. Let's take a look at some of today's other election news. The Lib Dems and the SNP have lost their legal battle to be included in an ITV election debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn tomorrow night. The High Court said the parties had the right to complain to the broadcasting regulator Ofcom about the programme after it had aired. Almost a third of young people are incorrectly registered to vote, and 1 in 4 black and Asian people are not registered to vote at all. That's according to the Electoral Commission, who are running a campaign to get everyone onto the electoral register ahead of the deadline, which is November the 26th. Well, how to pay for care for older people and those with disabilities will be a major challenge for whoever wins the election. Social care services across the United Kingdom are under significant pressure, and in England the system is run by local authorities and is widely acknowledged to be in urgent need of reform and more money. There are warnings that a failure to address the crisis at this election will push the care system to breaking point, as our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt explains now.
Would you like a cup of tea?
Over many months, we've heard from family after family bearing the brunt of the council-run care system in crisis.
It's crucial that as families, we find somewhere that is spot on.
We're going to go this way now, all right? Why? I want to be here.
Confronted by confusion, underfunding, and struggling to get the support they need.
I'm desperate, and I'm not the only one.
For Anne Byrne, that has meant fighting to keep open the care home where her 90-year-old mother, also called Anne, lives. The charity-run home is losing too much money, but finding another place nearby is difficult.
They said, this is your home. You just don't pinch people's homes away, do you?
Do you think people realise how much pressure the care sector's under?
No, definitely not. I mean, I didn't. And it's only when you have to find somewhere for a loved one that you realise it's dire.
So why is the care system in crisis? We're an ageing population. An increasing number of older people need help with such things as washing, dressing and eating. The number of working-age adults with disabilities is also rising. But in the last 9 years, in real terms, the money councils in England have spent on social care for each adult has fallen, despite recent government top-ups. It means fewer people now get local authority support. And those providing care say across the country, the fees they get from councils simply don't cover the costs. Mark Adams runs Anne's care home in Liverpool.
It is a constant battle to balance the books. In the northwest, 7 of our homes are losing about £2 million a year, and we're using surpluses that thankfully we make in other parts of the charity to just about keep those homes afloat. That's not a sustainable position.
These stacks of inquiries, discussion papers and government reports represent more than 20 years of talking about how we should pay for adult social care in the long term. None have led to significant change. This is an issue which has tripped politicians up at previous elections, yet an ageing population and increasing pressures mean they can't afford to ignore it.
So what needs fixing? As well as the need for more money and a long-term plan for the sector, there's a serious shortage of staff. Although Scotland and Wales spend more money on care per head than England, attracting and keeping nurses and care workers is a major issue everywhere. With families and the charity working together, a buyer has now been found to keep Anne's care home open. Even so, she has little time for the politicians who have so far failed to reform the care system.
They don't know what it's like, so you don't expect them to help in any way, because they don't realise what it's like. You've got to go through it yourself to know, haven't you?